Well, they're just joining in by the look of it.
Oh, yes. Okay,
Yeah.
that's right. I
So
forgot.
there's no admission. So
we're not in the other Zoom. Yeah.
yeah, so people are just joining us. So for those joining us, welcome, and we'll give another minute or two, and we're just having a chat if you've joined us early. So welcome to those very punctual attendees. Give it another minute or so. I might just share my screen now if that's all right for everyone.
Now, as we've said, we're having a chat. We've all gone silent, of course. That's what happens.
Well, we're recording, but no, we'll cut this bit out of any public recording. So let me just get my slideshow sorted. And there we go. So we'll just have that as a holding screen. And then we can kick off shortly. For those who are interested, I've heard a whisper that the state budget in Victoria might be the 24th of November. So a bit more to wait, unfortunately. But they've obviously had to get a lot done this year. Oh, people are joining us. Fantastic. Okay, I might kick off. It is about 1 minute past the hour, and in true Zoom fashion, we will start reasonably punctually, and really the first few minutes will be obviously me just going through a couple of things before we kick off with the discussion itself. So welcome to those who are joining us as we speak. I want to specifically welcome Bernadette O'Connor from Management Governance Australia, who's been facilitating and pulling together this series for us. I'd like to welcome you all, obviously, but acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as Australia's First Nations people and traditional custodians of lands and waterways, and we pay respects to the Wadawurrung people of this land, elders past, present and emerging. And for those dialing in other regions, I acknowledge the lands that you are meeting us on in a virtual environment. In terms of just some special welcomes, I've just put up a screen there about privacy and knowing that we'll be recording this session and we will make this available on YouTube in due course as well. Special welcome to Committee for Geelong's Chair, Clive Pugh, who will have a brief chat at the end of our session today with us all. And for board directors, Matt Dickens and Cora Trevathan, if they're online, welcome to our two board directors who've registered to attend. Also, if they're here at the moment, President of the Chamber of Commerce, Mark Edmonds, was going to attend. And we've got quite a few CEOs and managers from different organisations, including Claire Amies from GenU, who's the CEO here in Geelong, Lynn Morgan from Northern Futures, who's participated in a few discussions this week, Wayne Elliott, who's the new CEO of the Geelong Region Local Learning Employment Network. So I hope Wayne's online. Hello. Apologies from the Minister for Training and Skills, Gail Tierney. She was hoping to join us today, but I think the upper house is sitting, as far as I'm aware, and also Chris Cousins, a member for Geelong, who wanted to attend but couldn't today. We also have representatives from Deakin University, the Gordon. They've been pivotal in these conversations during the week, as well as members from Regional Development Victoria, the City of Greater Geelong and Department of Transport. So just to give you an idea, we've got a few quite diverse range of people dialing in and joining us today. So in terms of engagement, you'd be all well versed in this, but we've got a Q&A function. We've also got a chat function. Please feel free to post as we go. And Bernadette will, I'm sure, do a fabulous job going through those questions as we progress in today's webinar. Our media are present today. David Cairns, who's a reporter who we work quite closely with, will be and has been attending sessions during the week. So just know we've got some media present. We do ask, and David's great about this, if there's specific things that David wants to clarify with presenters, we'll be introducing that as an option for him to make a call. But just to let you know, we are recording, we are making this public, and we also have media present today. From a Committee for Geelong perspective, we always like to thank our Corporate Plus members, Bizanella, Bendigo Bank, GMHPA, National Disability Insurance Scheme, Transport Accident Commission, the Victorian Regional Channels Authority and WorkSafe Victoria. Thank you for your support. We couldn't do what we do without you. and all of our members and any members present today as well. So just a very brief welcome from me. We've had quite the journey in the last couple of months, and the work of the future, for those who aren't aware of the Committee for Geelong's work, we're a not-for-profit organisation that engages across I'd say the full facet of Geelong's community. So we have members from local government, from not-for-profits, from commercial organisations, statutory authorities, and we heavily engage with all levels of government about what we believe is the best future for Geelong. And one of our key action areas in our strategic plan, which is our 3-year plan, is work of the future. And we wanted to talk to our members about this in the last year, and in the months leading into this, we held a roundtable with Deakin and the Gordon and secondary school members and other stakeholders, including G21, Geelong Region Alliance, and wanted to run this series of webinars and conversations this week. So we kicked off with a webinar on Monday morning with a series of conversations during this week, and this is the closing webinar where we've obviously got presenters. But I just wanted to thank everyone that's involved, but also, as I said, especially to Bernadette O'Connor for all the work she's done. And I will leave it at that, and I'll hand over to Bernadette to take us through today's webinar. So I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Jen. And
no problem.
Welcome everyone to Friday, the 30th of October, and our closing session for the Committee for Geelong's 2020 Future of Work Forum. It's been a really inspiring and challenging week. I think there's been lots of fantastic conversations, and I think the challenge is to go forward, and that forward is looking very positive, I think, for the G21 region in terms of the people who are prepared to come on and have the discussions. I'm going to introduce our first guest speaker, keynote speaker for this morning. And while I do that, I'm going to share my screen as well, so that that I bring up Dr. Leone Wheeler's presentation. So Dr. Leone Wheeler is a research fellow working on a number of projects for Professor Rupert Maclean, who is the former Unesco Chair of Technical and Vocational Education, TVET, and Sustainable Development. So it's Technical and Vocational Education and Sustainable Development, with the Office of Applied Research and Innovation in the College of North Atlantic, Qatar, and in 2018 and 19. Leone's presentation, Applied Learning, 21st Century Skills and the Relevance for Learning Cities, Adapting to the Next Normal, builds on research conducted by Rupert Maclean over many years on vocational education and training and sustainable and inclusive development. It includes recent work by Professor Maclean and Leone on the 21st century skills for employability and sustainability. So Leone, I'm going to hand over to you, and I'll get you to give me a direction if I'm not moving the slides fast enough or too quickly for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernadette, and thank you for inviting me here. The outline of my presentation will be, firstly, briefly, I'll go over Rupert's research, and then I will talk about the Learning City movement, and then a brief definition of defining 21st century skills and the disruptors of change, and then inviting you to join a conversation about reimagining economic inclusive futures, which is going on at the moment through the Pascal International Observatory. Next slide. Now, Rupert's work in TVET, known as VET here, has been his life's work, and the term used in Qatar was applied learning. So I just wanted to refocus on applied learning. The term can vary from country to country, but it has relevance to what is being learnt in the real world outside the classroom or training room. And it's about partnerships and connections with organisations and individuals outside school or training institutions, and nurturing the student in a holistic manner. Examples of cooperative education, civic engagement, creative works, research, entrepreneurship, field studies, clinical placements. These are all examples of applied learning. Now, when I've worked with Rupert in Qatar and one of the next slide, please, he talked about why TVET was so important. And it was about that work equals life. As Delors said, lifelong learning is about work and life, success in work that benefits the community, the future of our young people who will enter the labour market. And when Rupert was working with UNESCO in Bonn, the UNESCO Univoc Centre, the World Bank estimated that 80% of all jobs involved TVET and applied learning skills. Next slide. We all know why work for us is important, and this is challenging at the moment. I'm going through these fairly quickly, this first part, because this is all probably known to you, but it's background. Next slide, please. In Qatar, Rupert says applied learning and TVET have a critical role to play in achieving sustainable development, greening of economies, green growth, inclusive growth, and lifelong learning. And I'll just highlight some of his books. This one on work, learning, and sustainable development. And the next two, vocalisation of secondary education, where this has been used internationally to realise the importance of vocational skills worldwide, and also this education skills for inclusive green growth and the greening of the economy. I don't have to remind you about sustainable development goals. I know you'll have it as part of your planning internationally, and they are part of Education 2030 Agenda, which aims, and Sustainability Goal 4 about quality education, which aims to ensure inclusive, equitable and quality education that promotes lifelong learning opportunities for all. Next slide. TVET and applied learning is the master key to achieving sustainable development and social development. As Delors said, the concept of lifelong learning throughout life emerges as one of the keys for the 21st century. And as Maclean talks about, for most international organisations, the policy of providing learning opportunities throughout life is viewed as the master key that opens the door to poverty alleviations, greater social justice, equity, peace building, sustainable development, and sustainable development. Now I'll go on to my part of the presentation, which is talking about the Learning Cities movement, which has actually been going on for UNESCO since 2013, and UNESCO defines a learning city, and I've put this definition up for you, and it really is about lifelong learning, the integration of learning and living, and learning covering activities for people of all ages, children, young people, adults and older people in all life-wide contexts, work and businesses, schools and families and communities. The move towards a learning society recognises the interconnectedness of formal, non-formal and informal learning, as well as the formal curriculum of schools, universities, community education agencies to adapt and be responsive to change, that there is a vital need to form effective partnerships with actors from the public, private and voluntary sectors. Indeed, such partnerships can work towards a common goal and some of the complex issues that we're facing today. And next slide. I wanted to talk briefly about the global network of learning cities, which has been running since 2013. It's a international policy-orientated network providing inspiration, know-how and best practice, and it promotes the achievement of Sustainability Goal 4 about quality education, and also Sustainability Goal 11, making cities and human settlements safe, inclusive, resilient and sustainable. It's actually grown considerably. It now covers 230 member cities in 64 countries. And it's grown so much that they've decided to start up an Asian Pacific region. And the main country that has learning cities in this region is South Korea. They have 50 of them, and they have lifelong learning at a national level. But we in Australia have 3 members, the City of Melton and the City of Wyndham. I've been working with them a lot this year, and also Circular Heads in Tasmania. And I think that they provide something that can help internationally. And Sally Edwards from Melton was speaking at the Asia Pacific Regional Online Conference, and I've watched these people grow in their international dialogues. Next slide. I'll skip over this, but this is just a guide for decent work and entrepreneurship within healthy, green and inclusive equitable learning cities. And one project I was involved in Qatar was improving and enriching human capital of Qatar through the identification and development of 21st century skills for sustainability and employability. Now, I'm not going to go over this project too much, but there are the objectives of the project. And one thing that I was involved in, the universities that were involved in, was to define 21st century skills. And if you just go down a little bit, I think you'll go, can we go back to the 21st century skills, please? Sorry about that. There we go, that one. You've seen these skills before, and it was interesting when I was defining them and looking at the literature and the work of Professor Stephen Lamb from Victoria University. These skills come up again and again, and the most critical one is learning to learn. It's a critical thing that we all need in this time of change. And this is becoming very critical. In fact, the World Economic Forum Top 10 Skills for 2025, analytical thinking and innovation, active learning and learning strategies, complex solving, problem solving, and critical thinking and analysis are part of the critical thinking skills. And I think that when we interviewed people in Qatar, we found that everyone thought that they were very important, but the gaps we found were in environmental responsibility. Next slide, please. The disruptors of change, automation and robotics are changing our employment landscape. I think that you've probably discussed this over the week, so I won't go further on that. And climate change is critical now. In the words of McKibben, climate change is not a normal political negotiation between different interests where compromise makes obvious sense. Climate change is a negotiation between human beings and physics doesn't compromise past a certain point. There is no room to maneuver. And when we're talking about these disruptions, we're talking about the importance of STEM skills, and this has been talked about very much in the media this year. But we also mustn't forget STEAM, science, technology, education, arts and humanities and mathematics, because it's arts and humanities that will create these critical thinking skills that are so important for us, as we respond to an ever-changing need. And the E-STEAM was something I came across a couple of weeks ago, when the E stands for Education for Sustainable Development, and that is absolutely should be embedded in curriculum. Now, as we go on to working with Industry 4, Now, COVID-19 we've been dealing with this year, and the disruptors of change identified by the World Economic Forum, they have been accelerating, and they will only accelerate online learning and the way we work and all of these things that no doubt you've been discussing this week. Now, the next slide, what I want to talk about is this slide put up from an international professor in comparative and international education. And I'm going to put up a reference for you to link to on a Pascal webinar on the challenge of education for sustainable development. In this slide, Professor Schwitzfurth talks about the transformation potential of education. And in the reading, we can see this. Building back better. People are talking about building back better, new ways of teaching and learning, and making learning more equitable and exciting and learning driven. But there are concerns, and one of the concerns is about the lost learning and building back lost learning when schools and educational institutions are up and running for normal lives. In the short term, it could affect students' ability to learn and read and write. In the long term, it has consequences for lifelong learning, especially those young people who drop out of school or suffer declines in learning and who face lower lifelong learning and productivity. And we'll have less to spend on the public purse. The other thing is that globally, poverty rates are rising. So these are all challenges for educational access, equality and inclusion. So this is something we'll have to deal with. Next slide. But our learning cities are adapting to change. I want to just give you an example of Wyndon and Melton, who this year could not hold their learning festivals online when they were scheduled to. They were talking internationally to Pascal and the UNESCO International Lifelong Learning Institute, and came up with the idea of holding an international global learning festival. And in the middle of a lockdown in Melbourne, with 6 weeks to go, they organised a global learning festival that was online. It was magnificent, actually. I was very proud of them. I was on the working group as part of my role of as honorary CEO of the Australian Learning Community Network. And when we did the evaluation, we found that we had 110 events registered from 12 countries, including Canada, US, Ecuador, Turkey, Mexico, Hungary, UK, Ireland, Kenya and Qatar. The events represented various sectors, and that was learning right through to the community. So it was learning including universities, youth, disabilities, community development, local government, education, state government and libraries. They gave the best of what they had. I was in several of them and I learnt so much about the Indigenous life in Australia, about abalone farming in Tasmania, about cooking in Taiwan. And 8,500 people logged in and attended different events. Over 250 presenters shared the floor, and there was a reoccurring theme about partnerships, networking and connection. But the more important thing, in my opinion, is the broader discussion that we're having locally, nationally and globally about the importance of lifelong learning and the importance of connection, making connections and working on learning. Now, one thing that I'm very excited about is that Pascal International Observatory is starting a global discussion about imagining inclusive economic futures. And the lead discusser is Judith James, who is the former head of strategic regional collaboration with Wales in the UK. And I was talking to her the other night, and she said if Geelong wants to, the G21 want to join this discussion, they're most welcome. They have cities from Israel, from Italy, from the UK. We've got Wyndham here joining, and the kinds of things they're going to talk about is creating an entrepreneurial ecosystem for enterprise startup. But not only that, when we're talking about inclusive economic futures, we're also talking about visioning a new future for the work of for well-being. And Judith is really concerned about the levels of poverty in Wales, and especially in Swansea, where she comes from, and about what's going to happen to a lot of people in certain sectors of society who are unemployed, and she's going to, or are losing work. She's also put another stream in, is not working for well-being, and using lifelong learning to enhance active citizenship, volunteering, and personal well-being and fulfillment. And adjusting to uncontrolled external shocks that we're facing too. There's another stream of discussion. So I know you've had a really great discussion this week, and if you, I hope that you'll be able to join that conversation. And finally, another conversation that we're having is we're actually going to have Judith as a keynote speaker on as part of the Learning Wyndham Festival. And you're most welcome to register here as well, and to continue the conversation. And I have some references here of webinars that to follow up on the things that I've been talking about in my whirlwind talk, covering Rupert Maclean's work, learning cities, and changes that we're undergoing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leone. That's a brilliant way for us to start our to open our closing session for the Future of Work Forum. I'm so glad that you drew on Judith, James, and Swansea. I met Judith last year in Medellin, in Colombia, at the International Conference for Learning, Global Network of Learning Cities, and Judith spoke to me before then as we were drawing up the scoping study for G21 and for G21 to become a learning region. So Judith's work in Swansea and work more broadly informed the direction that we took with that scoping study. So that's a wonderful segue to beyond this forum for
yes, I
the
encourage
G21.
You to join in anything Judith does, because she's very, very organised, and she has many years of working on environmental ecosystems in Wales, and a great international contributor to the debate.
Now I'm just going to go to Pat Manane, has his hand up. Pat, would you like to, you've got a question for Leone? Let's see if we can't hear you, Pat. Maybe? Here we go.
So we have to give him permission to talk. So I just allowed him to talk, Bernadette. There
you go, Pat. I'm sure that there'd be very few times when people had to give you permission to talk. Could you put your question for Leone?
No, I'm sorry, I had a technical problem. I had it on the wrong setting, so my apologies.
No problems, Pat. Okay, have you got a question for Leone, Pat?
No.
No, okay. Well, I'm going to go to Jen then, and because Jen has talked about being interested in being involved from a committee's perspective of the Reimagining Inclusive Forums.
Yeah, no, it was just a comment to say that there's huge opportunity for not just the Committee for Geelong, because what we've tried to do is develop a group of not just interested experts, but people who have a willingness to collaborate. And this was a core part of the discussion we had even just in yesterday's session that was hosted by the CEO of G21 Geelong Regional Alliance, Elaine Carbines. So it's just to say, number one, yes, absolutely interested in the opportunity to be involved in those discussions. I was interested to see what Pat was going to say, but I also was just making an assumption that not only would G21 be interested, but you know, the City of Greater Geelong, I think, would be looking at this. And what I've said to Bernadette offline is that the Geelong region, as in not G21, but the Greater Geelong region, has a clever and creative vision. So I don't know if you're aware of that, but in that vision, there's KPIs around education and workforce and economic growth as part of that. And I thought the question I'm posing behind the scenes, which will obviously probably come out a little bit more fulsomely, is, well, what would it look like if we wanted to pursue the Learning City goals, agendas? How does that align with the clever and creative vision? And then also we've got a sustainability framework in the City of Greater Geelong. Yes. We've also got a Unesco Creative City of Design designation. So it's understanding the whole nature of the opportunity that Geelong has, but also the timeliness of, you mentioned COVID being, you know, this complete change that's allowing a lot of, well, giving us an environment to have these discussions. So we totally agree, and we think that, you know, let's all really contribute to having a chance to have these discussions now, sooner rather than later. So it was just really to say that, oh, there we go. And yes, Carly Brennan, of course, is talking about skilling the Bay of the Gordon, and there's significant opportunity for us to work back with these stakeholders.
Yes, I drive, every time I drive past Geelong and see the City of Design, I understand that, and understand that that you have so many wonderful opportunities in Geelong, and I think that you could start by joining the discussion with Pascal International Observatory. That doesn't force you to become a partner with the UNESCO UIL straight away. And by joining the Reimagining Inclusive Economic Futures, you can start the international dialogue and work towards joining the global network when you are ready. You actually can determine what you want to focus on in the global network of learning cities. So if Reimagining Inclusive Economic Futures is part of that, if you join Pascal first, a lot of the cities that are part of the global network of learning cities also have that as their aim. So you have similar aims, and they're going to showcase what they're doing in terms of reimagining inclusive economic futures, and you could showcase what you're doing as well, and then you're learning from one another, and that's the power of the dialogue, I believe. And I've attended about three international Pascal global conferences on learning cities, and it's the mayors of the city, so it's actually the city administrators who are dialoguing with one another, and I think that you don't have to go as broad as the learning city movement definition. You can focus on what you're doing and build on it, but you get an opportunity to dialogue, international dialogue. I think that's its advantage.
Thank you very much, Leone. I'm going to, while I should have said and I think Jen did, while our speakers are speaking, please pop your questions into the chat. So I should think of more for Leone, and you think of questions for our other guest speakers, please pop them into the chat. I'm going to move now to our next guest speakers, and Simon Massey and Rochelle Hedstrom are joining us from the Newcastle City Council. And I should, given the global nature of Leone's discussion, I should say it's Newcastle in Australia as opposed to in England. Oh, I should have checked that with Simon and Rochelle first. They might want to be England's Newcastle, but no, it's definitely the city of Newcastle in Australia. Simon is an economist, demographer and strategic analyst, as well as a Churchill Fellowship recipient in 2018. He has 10 years professional experience in state and local government. He's an engaging leader with a proven track record of developing transformational strategic documents and implementing key reforms to government policy. Rochelle is a passionate community development practitioner working to achieve outcomes that improve well-being of individuals and families in diverse contexts. She's currently working as Community Development Facilitator for the City of Newcastle. And she's worked in youth and community development space for 11 years at the state, local and non-government settings in Indonesia, the Northern Territory and in New South Wales. So I'll hand over to Simon and Rochelle now for their presentation to us on Newcastle's creating youth employment opportunities. Thank you very much, Rochelle and Simon.
Thanks very much for the generous welcome, Bernadette. We really appreciate
Thanks,
that. And very much glad to be in Newcastle, Australia, rather than Newcastle, England, noting the public health concerns in Northern England at the moment as well. Good afternoon, everybody. Just want to begin by acknowledging that Rochelle and I are coming to you today from the traditional lands of the Awabakal and Warramai peoples and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. So also want to thank Jen and the team at the Committee for Geelong for this opportunity today to present, and City of Newcastle in partnership with the Committee for Geelong, City of Greater Geelong and Wollongong City Council have formed a Gateway Cities Alliance. And in this recovery from COVID-19 and economic recovery in particular, I think there's some really great opportunities and synergies between the three cities, recognising their place as second cities and gateway cities to drive economic development and opportunities across Australia. And I think it's a really valuable alliance and one that we're really committed to here at the City of Newcastle. As Bernadette said, Rochelle and I are going to split the presentation today. And I just want to begin by fronting up to the local challenges. The story of youth unemployment and youth underemployment is a global story from COVID. It was one that existed before COVID, but has really intensified in light of the challenges that everyone's facing. And to bring a local lens to it, there's a couple of statistics here that I'll talk through in terms of our local Newcastle context at this stage. So the key question is, how do we maintain employability, skills and well-being for large numbers of our local young people when job opportunities are scarce? Currently in Newcastle, 1 in 5 people approximately, and the data's sometimes a little difficult to interpret at this scale as well, but 1 in 5 people under the age of 25 unemployed in Newcastle, and that increases to 2 in 5 who are underemployed and not working the hours that they would like to. Obviously, the evidence indicates the disadvantages felt by young people multiply and are carried throughout their lifetime. So it really gives an imperative to act and to respond. It's also a wicked problem and lots of complexities to it, and clearly no silver bullet to answer it. And we're at the City of Newcastle in our role as a local government organisation, considering what actions can we take that supplement and complement the actions that are being taken at both the federal and state level as well to maximise opportunities for young people in Newcastle. And obviously, of course, our program responses need to be inclusive in nature. So in response to COVID-19, the City of Newcastle has implemented a range of different initiatives. Similar to Geelong, we have a, don't you love the web chat where someone calls you while you're on a webinar at the same time? So my apologies about that. But similar to the City of Geelong, we implemented a community and economic resilience package quite early to respond to maximise cash flow for small businesses and support vulnerable residents in our community. Following that, we shifted to coordinating city leadership and formed a city task force for 2020. And the classic Zoom photo is on the right-hand side of the slide there, and all of the organisations, Newcastle-based organisations, are listed at the bottom. The organisations who were part of the City Task Force represent the largest employers in the city, or a network that represents a large collection of employers across the city. We were seeking to respond to the youth employment challenges that were facing Newcastle, and we responded in three distinct layers to that. So firstly, from an advocacy point of view, what could we be advocating to state and federal governments, reflecting local insights and local stories? Secondly, what actions could we take within our own organisations as the largest employers in the city? There's a clear imperative to act within as well as the advocacy out. And then finally, what could we do on the ground to supplement the whole range of different services and programs that are available, and to complement and expand them, recognising the challenges that we're facing our city. So I'm going to very briefly talk to the first two, and then I'm going to hand over to Rochelle, who talk through the community program that we're in the process of implementing at the moment. And as Jen and Bernadette said, very happy to take any questions afterwards and follow up questions as well. So one of the regular activities of the City Task Force was to put together a monthly memo called the Newcastle Response. And this is where we took local data and local stories, understood and reflected federal government and state government policies, and proposed opportunities to partner with us and also to expand the policy suite that was currently being acted on. We had a different focus for these memos each month. Typically, we focused on industries or sectors that were most impacted by COVID. So that included the tourism sector, the arts sector, and the community sector. We also focused on population groups that were most impacted, and obviously that was young people, and noting this, this issue here, which is on the right-hand side of youth employment. The policy asks are listed on the left. We finished this memo in August, and just to note in particular, the supporting apprentices and trainees was a clear message that was resonating locally in Newcastle and was incorporated in detail in our policy request to government. And noting the expansion and funding of organisations to bring on new apprentices was a key part of the federal government. We saw that as a really positive outcome and recognise that we were part of the choir who were advocating on this platform, but see that as a really positive outcome for young people, and we'll be seeking to ensure that Newcastle receives its fair share of those opportunities as the budget's implemented as well. The second component was what actions could we take within our own organisation, and we developed what we've called a Youth Employment Charter. And this was a commitment that organisations could sign up to and pledge to around 5 key metrics for youth employment. So that included our organisation prioritising the maintenance and expansion of trainee, apprentice and graduate positions. This is obviously quite a significant commitment, particularly in light of some of the fiscal challenges that organisations are currently going through. And so the request was premised understanding that this may not be able to be implemented instantly, but this would be a commitment over the recovery phase of COVID to, wherever possible, maximise the early career opportunities for young people in Newcastle. We also had commitments around youth training, youth voice, and recognising the importance of including young people in the decision-making process, youth supports, and celebrating the role that young people play in our local economy. A number of the City Task Force members made decisions to commit to the Youth Employment Charter, which was a really significant step. This often involved presentations to their board and deliberate considerations about organisational planning over the coming 3, 6, 12-month time periods. Really proud to say the City of Newcastle also signed on and is looking to expand our apprenticeship program in 2021 where possible as well, which is a great statement from local government to make about providing opportunities for young people. Once the City Task Force members were provided with an opportunity to pledge and sign on to the Youth Employment Charter, we've also taken a step to proactively promote it more widely across the city and across the region. A number of organisations have stepped forward to make that commitment to the Youth Employment Charter as well. There's a web portal on our website which enables people to sign up and also to be able to celebrate those organisations who have committed to the Youth Employment Charter. We're also in the early stages of embedding this into a more longer term strategy at the City of Newcastle as well, and seeking to support local organisations with strategies and ideas about how they can enable stronger contributions of young people within their organisation. And that's a piece of work that Rochelle is beginning to pick up as well. I'm going to hand over to Rochelle now, who's going to talk about the community programs that we're looking to implement at the moment. Thanks, Rochelle.
Thanks, Simon. And hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. And I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Awabakal and Warramai land, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So following on from Simon, whilst Simon sort of focused on the social and community infrastructure needs and policy reforms around tackling youth unemployment, a whole of community localised effort is required on the ground to drive local job opportunities, as you all know. And as such, so the task force before my time, but they did sort of commence sort of scoping for a community-based wraparound program that's aimed at maximising local opportunities for young people in training, workplace learning and early careers. As such, we sort of started with the concept of what was needed is a centralised resource to support Newcastle youth in accessing opportunities. There is consensus amongst all of us that it's a recessionary environment, and that environment is a lot trickier to navigate for a young person. And even prior to COVID, I guess the job seeking landscape and is a tricky landscape to navigate. Next slide. So in coming to that, my sort of starting points over the past couple of months have been to do a little bit of cross-jurisdictional research and speak to our local stakeholders. And throughout that process, we've identified 3 dominant groups requiring different policy and program responses. So I guess, as you can see, that City of Newcastle is coming at this from a range of different angles, and with the charter and those guiding principles metrics that Simon was speaking of, we're going to have a range of different actions and strategies sitting underneath that to really try and reach young people from different cohorts. And we're looking at, primarily looking at our high risk young people who before COVID weren't doing so well and are often experiencing social, cultural, economic, familial and or spiritual challenges. We've got our second group, which is young people at risk of disengaging from school. So our year 11s. So a lot of the conversations I've been having with our local schools and TAFE training services and support services are seeing year 11s dropping out at a rate that they've never seen before. And then obviously we've got our good performers, so people that were doing okay prior to COVID and didn't have particular difficulty finding a job, and in these times have become unemployed due to changes in supply and demand for their skills. So next slide. So with the community wraparound program, our overarching aims obviously are to improve youth employment opportunities in the Newcastle LGA, increase workplace learning opportunities for young people at risk of leaving school in the LGA, and sitting above that, which I sort of haven't included here, but it's really about tracking, assessing, reviewing, reflecting and evaluating the journey of a young person accessing these opportunities at a hyper-local level. So there's been a range of possibilities that local government could take in the local space. It's not a traditional area that council has worked in, the youth employment space. So it's been sort of a careful, I guess, process of having conversations with everyone on the ground. So our employment service providers, our youth supports providers, our schools, our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander groups, our COLD groups, our disability groups, really trying to do have a widespread conversation. And the consensus over the past couple of months has been that what we're needing is a centralised, hyperlocal community facilitator service. So our approach at the moment is to partner with 2 key agencies who are already centralised youth employment facilitators, so Career Links and Youth Express, who will, utilising their existing connections, be able to work closely with the City of Newcastle and charter signatories to create a hyperlocal pipeline, basically, for young people to access workplace learning opportunities through charter signatories, and help build the charter as well, and keep charter signatories accountable to the commitments that they've signed on to. So Yeah, it's still in its infancy, but basically we're looking at outcomes that will enable a more localised approach to influence outcomes based on the local situation. As Simon alluded to earlier, and as we're all aware, the real data and the reality of the situation is quite hard to capture at those higher levels. So it's really a matter of drilling down, and we're really hoping that this facilitator resource is it's council's way of capacity building our local organisations. We see that as sustainability being built into the program. We're looking at the model's currently in development, and we'll have to go through, I think, back and forth between organisations and through to our stakeholder groups for feedback, but we're hoping that it could be operational by March 2021 and piloted for 2 years. Our key deliverables are workplace learning opportunities and training and employment opportunities increased. We're still sort of looking at sort of the numbers that we would cap that up, but we'd be looking at realistic sort of achievable goals there. And yep, so lots of focused conversations over the past couple of months with these providers, which have brought us to this model that we're proposing. And I guess here we've done sort of a little bit of a program model, I guess you could say, where we've got Samaritans Foundation, City of Newcastle and the YWCA sort of coming together and undertaking consultations with stakeholder groups, and looking at the City of Newcastle. There's opportunity. It's very timely with the local jobs program funding that is being rolled out to our employment service agencies. So we're in discussions with them. It's not confirmed, but looking to see if we can leverage off each other's resources locally through that. And then in the light green, you've got Youth Express and Career Links, who I guess we keep using the term octopus. So really looking at utilising the strengths of these two organisations, who they have transport, they've got over 20 years experience in the LGA with local young people and long-term unemployed. So we really see a lot of merit in going down this route, and councils in other areas, you know, have gone down the direct service path, and there's many ways, I guess, council can engage in this issue, and this, after sort of long consultations, has been sort of our decision. And we're hoping that, yeah, strong linkages between our RTOs, our job active providers and our youth support services will be able to, I guess, create that local pipeline through. Next slide. So our next steps, so our wraparound model will be presented to the Hunter Strategic Committee in November, and our goal there is to get local buy-in first and foremost. And as I mentioned before, hoping to commence in March 2021. And as Simon was saying, we are developing an action plan that sits underneath the charter, and we're hoping that that will make this charter a living document and enable council to really work in this space in a really versatile, responsive manner, because we've got areas around our communications campaign. So a big issue we've identified is getting information to families and young people around what is actually available out there. So we're working on that over the next couple of years, and looking at local enterprise and startup programs. There's a program that we're currently in discussions with University of Newcastle about around supporting young people around idea generation and those soft skills that we were discussing before. And then obviously concurrently we're developing a monitoring and evaluation framework. So that's kind of where we're at. There's still a long way to go, but some promising work thus far. I think you're on mute, Bernadette.
You'd think by now I would have got it, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Very promising, Rochelle and Simon. Fantastic work by the City of Newcastle. Jen, I know you would really love to. This has been a piece of work that Newcastle have been doing that you've been watching very closely. So would you like to make a comment? or ask a question.
Oh, I would love to comment. I just think there's people here today who are very quiet and I think should probably either post and or just request to speak. But I'll have oh, there you go, Tracy Jeffrey. You do a great job. So thank you, Tracy. Tracy's from our Skills and Jobs Centre, that is a program that is through the Gordon, the local TAFE here. But I just wanted to make a few comments because I think you've done an incredible job for the short period of time that you've worked on this, and to have a proposed model of that, and I'll say it detail because I know the consultation you would have had to do to go through it. My question is, when you talk about how it's resourced, because this is always the issue when things like this come up, and it's probably a very nuts and bolts question, but that's the reality sometimes of these things. You've got an FTE there dedicated. Is that a new position or is that added on to existing positions at council?
Did you want to answer that, Simon, or do you want me to answer?
Very briefly, Jen, looks like a contract position for 18 months to 2 years that we'd be looking to set up there. And more broadly, we've got an economic development strategy that a discussion paper that's being released next week. And City of Newcastle is really reframing our approach to economic development with a clear people-centred approach, looking at skills development locally and talent attraction and people attraction to the city, which is a distinct shift from economic development that typically sits in the business attraction space, and recognising there's a number of other forums that exist in Newcastle that are doing some great work in that space, is that the role and the gap that local government can play is in that skills development and fronting up to some of the challenges that Newcastle may face in terms of skills and skills development over the coming 5, 10, 15 years, noting some of the sunset industries that are based here in Newcastle as well. And so we really see a program like this, which is a clear link in terms of youth and young people's skills development, being a central place for economic development to be operating locally moving forward as well.
I'll jump. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, I see Pat Manane mention something, but what I might say is that in the city of Greater Geelong, this isn't necessarily about council, I'm interested in how we would look at this locally. You'd have your own response, one would assume, but we have youth development, economic development, community development. Now they're all in different areas. I think community development, youth development's in one directorate, and I think Janice Lane was going to be here. She could potentially explain a bit more about that. But Eco Dev, where you're involved, and I just think it's a really important note that you made, which is this is enhancing this concept of what is true economic development. And I will speak around how the Committee for Geelong would see this as well, is that research, and now COVID particularly, is showing that it's not so much necessarily about businesses, because it's about talent attraction, which is exactly what you said. And people are going to be far more, I'd say, overt in what they want from their employers, or if they're entrepreneurs, where they work, as in the location. So they'll say, look, there's a lot more flexibility. Organisations, this is actually at the heart of everything we've been talking about this week. People can work far more flexibly now because we've also been kind of forced to. So it's accelerated this situation. So I think the economic development view that you're taking is absolutely not just current, but it's where we are going, which is the nature of the future of work. So I think Pat was saying something there just about youth development. I would think that you need to start thinking about how we work in an integrated way. So this idea of community wraparound is just a great term to use, because for what it's worth, I've had a bit of experience working in and around the, job active, federal government, kind of state government funded Jobs Victoria type space. And the issue is those supports, particularly for young people. So I just want to congratulate you. I won't say any more because I haven't seen any more comments, but I really will obviously continue to watch this model closely. And I think part of what we'll do, Bernadette, is look at, we've also talked about Learning City, but look at this idea around, is what we're doing being approached in the right way, which is this really comprehensive, let's come together and really think about what resources are already there. And it's exactly what we were talking about yesterday, Bernadette. There's a really strong will here in Geelong to not just show leadership, and leadership isn't that we go top down, we'll tell people what to do. It's how do we all come together and leverage everything that's already happening, like the work of Tracy Jeffries or Lynn from Northern Futures, which is another program we have here in Geelong. So
thank you very much, Jen. Sorry, I'm going to, Michelle, we might come back to that then at the end, if that's right. Can you hold that comment? I'm going to go across now to Anandra Daniel Noon. So we call him, you know, those of us who know Dan, call him Dan. It's really been interesting this morning. Leone has talked about at the global level and at the local level. Simon and Rochelle have talked about local strategy and community action. And Dan's example for us to this morning is a very local community action piece of work that brings together the applied learning that Leone talked about and the community approach, but also the idea of bringing digital and technology together with people who are disadvantaged within the labour market to solve a problem for employers in the Northern Territory. So Dan is a project officer, and I have to fess up, I have a conflict, well, not quite a conflict of interest, I have a very strong interest in a personal connection to this project. Dan is the project officer of the Care Plays VR project. He works for the National Disability Services and is seconded to Workforce Plus. Dan took a medical discharge from the Australian military, and after long-term recovery is pursuing his passion for effecting positive change in the lives of young people. Dan is undertaking his master's level studies at the moment. And Care Plays VR, I'll get Dan to talk a little bit more about it, a virtual reality work experience pre-employment program being delivered with for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander youth in the Northern Territory and linked to the human services sector. So Dan, I'll hand over to you and welcome very much.
Thanks, Bernadette. Thank you for having me. Alrighty, is my screen showing at the moment? Let's just get into, is that all good?
You've just got your comments showing as well.
Oh,
Dan.
no. All right, let me fix that up real quick. Sorry, give me 1 sec. I'll have to share the other screen because it goes to the other side. Alrighty, that should be better. Cool, no worries. As Bernadette said, name's Daniel. Before I kick on and share with you this really exciting program referred to as Care Plays VR, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional landowners where I'm currently sitting today, the Larrakia people, and also pay my respects to their elders past and present. Very lucky to have called this place home for over 2 years now, and I highly recommend if you haven't visited the Northern Territory, get on down here or even live here, to be honest. It's a great place. It's the secret of Australia, I'd say. Alrighty, so what is Care Plays VR? Now I'm gonna give you a quick, I guess a quick overview of the whole program in 10 minutes. I'd love to do longer, but today's 10 minutes. But essentially, Care Plays VR is a pre-employment program for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders aged between 16 and 25. Now, it's focused towards the human services sector. Why the human services sector is a good question, because in the NT, it's a big part of our employment sector in terms of employment pathways. And by 2023, it in fact be the largest. So we have a great opportunity to link Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders into the human services sector. And, you know, we need to also recognise that a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders already have existing skills, knowledge, hobbies, interests, values that align really well to the human services sector. When I say human services sector, just so there's no confusion, I'm talking about youth work, disability, aged care, childcare, allied health. I mean, the possibilities are endless. You know, having worked with young Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders in the NT for a while now, you know, we need to understand and really appreciate that the fact that you can speak multiple languages and have a high level cultural understanding is really important in the NT. And that's something that I'm really passionate about. I wish I could speak multiple languages, and if I could, I'd certainly be selling that when I go meet employers. You know, masters, PhDs, degrees, they're great. Don't get me wrong. It takes a lot of hard work to get there, but so does having multiple languages. And Bernadette touched on the real need for employers around the NT to have these skills. I mean, having gone to Maningrida, or in any remote region within the NT, you know, one of the challenges is, you know, holding on to your employees, because I mean, you know, it's awesome that people want to go over to say Maningrida and they do a lot of work and they're extremely passionate. Don't get me wrong, but the challenge is they end up leaving at some point. Not all the time, but I mean, will they stay there for 25 to 30 years? You know, arguably you'd say no, but people living in those communities, that's their home. So it's a more sustainable workforce. In terms of, and on top of that, I know Simon and Rochelle, you know, you touched on young people already having it tough before COVID-19 hit. So, you know, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders job seekers are already at a disadvantage. You know, we can acknowledge that in the Closing the Gap report. And on top of that, we've got COVID-19. So I think, you know, as a developed nation where Australia's enjoyed economic prosperity for many decades, we have an absolute obligation to provide meaningful pathways into employment, in this case, the human services sector. So in the NT in particular, you know, we've got a really good opportunity to do that. In terms of the virtual reality component of this project, which makes it really exciting, is look, it was built on the back of Workplace VR, which was out of Workforce Plus. And the reason why we've done that is if you can imagine an immersive experience, say you put a young person puts the headset on and they're looking around and they get a really visual understanding of what it's like to be working in the sector. So if we take, for example, a disability support worker, not sure if I mentioned that, we'd love to do every single role, but in this case it's a support worker, but we also need to acknowledge that the values and skills you learn as a support worker can align to many other jobs. But a young person gets to put the headset on and they can look around and they can see what it's like to be a support worker. You know, it's not just taking a client or a participant to the bathroom. That's one of the biggest misconceptions. And using VR has been a great way to, I guess, break down those barriers. Real quick, the Get Set skills. Now, these were some resources developed by Isaac NT. They're one of the partners. I should mention the partners being Karen Sheldon, who are a local mob up here, who are the training, who are delivering the training, Workforce Plus and NDS. We're a peak body as a service provider. That's been really helpful in terms of the employer engagement, which I'll touch on in a moment. But yeah, the Get Set skills was developed for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders where English wasn't necessarily their first language, but also for migrant populations. So it was it was never to be used as the core resources for the program, but it definitely supported it, and it still does support it to this day. I should add that the courses are currently ongoing in Alice and in Darwin, and we have one in Tennant Creek next year. So that's for the locations where we're delivering this program. In terms of the scalability, as we know, I mean, the resources that have been developed to date can be delivered anywhere in Australia, which is awesome. You know, Alice Springs and Darwin are very different. Alice Springs, Tennant Creek, very different. So facilitators, Karen Sheldon in this case, you know, they're experts working with this cohort, so they can contextualize it in what works best for them. In terms of COVID-19, I know we all talk about that all the time, but, you know, despite the challenges that we've had, you know, we continued on working. We utilized many of the resources that I'm sure everyone else who's tuning in today and the panelists use, being Zoom, and also a program or software called Mural. And Mural was a great way to collaborate and really harness the collective approach, which I think is really important in any forms of employment, because it really allows buy-in from multiple players, stakeholders, and also the participants themselves. We did a co-design with employers back in February 2020, and we also did a co-design with our young people back earlier in the year at Yarra College in Alice Springs. So all the young people were identified as either Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. So it was really important to get that, you know, that input from young people and various stakeholders as well. In terms of the employer engagement, now this is something that you know, some people say it is challenging, and you know, it can be. But I think the trick is with any consultation is the need for respect. And I know everyone probably does that, but I found that as long as I'm respectful and acknowledging everybody's capacity, particularly in a COVID-19 environment, I found that a lot of employers were really supportive, particularly around providing Indigenous people up here in the NT employment pathways. Here's a sort of a big picture of what the co-design looked like. It looks pretty full on and a bit scary, but you know, for somebody who didn't have much of a background on the framework, which is known as Chaos Pilot, and that comes out of Europe, Denmark, it was established in 1991. Look, I didn't have any idea what it was, and Judith McKay, if you Google her on LinkedIn, she's a champion of the vet space, and she was the real leader around Chaos Pilot. I'd highly recommend connecting with her. But it almost came in, it was very intuitive how the steps work. You know, initially we worked on who we wanted to bring into the course, what we needed, how we were doing it, and also in the middle, it's a bit small, you know, reminding ourselves what the vision was, why we're doing this project, you know, bringing it back to why we were meeting every week, why we're putting in all these hours, and not losing focus of our end goal. Then we worked on what attitudes, knowledge, and skills the participants we were hoping to build with the participants, and we simply did that collectively on Zoom and also on Mural at the same time. It's like a butcher's paper, but an electronic version where everybody can control the mouse and sticky notes and whatnot. And we quite literally just dragged it across and we tried to identify, you know, what might be a really good curriculum. So what you're looking at there is a draft, and I'll go to the next screen. That gives you a better view of the draft. And we identified, you know, what core skills do we need in week 1? If you look here in week 1, we identified life skills, self-care, community awareness. So if I can give you an example, in week 1 of this program, we brought down a mob called Healthy Living NT, and the focus was healthy living. Healthy living, that whether that be diet or exercise, and we felt that was a really fundamental part of forming resilience to lead on to sustainable employment. I think everybody can agree. Being healthy certainly helps to, you know, be able to participate in the workforce over the long term. Now, I know this looks pretty scary. This is even worse than the other one, but it's actually quite simple when you break it down. And once again, this is a resource from the Chaos Pilot. It's called the Learning Arches. So if we look at this big, massive red line at the very top, that's the broader human services sector. If we go another level beneath that, we've got the overall course, which is just here. And then we've got what the weeks look like. So in the first week, it was the connection to the program. From week 2 to week 3, we're really diving deep in what the human services is, because a lot of young people don't even know what opportunities exist. That's half the challenge. And then also in week 4, we're transitioning to jobs. And I don't know if I mentioned at the start, because I'm going pretty fast here, but after their 4-week course, they'll move into a 2-week work placement, which will then feed into 6 weeks post-placement support from the Karen Sheldon facilitators. What are the pathways that we hope for and strive towards? We want traineeships, straight up paid employment, maybe volunteering opportunities, further study, and so on. So we really want to continue with that momentum. Real quick, I don't have time to go through every single little arch, but if we go beneath the week 1 arch, which is concentrating on my skills, we look at day 1 and day 2. Once again, I was referring to relationship building, of course, on day 1. You know, relationships is really important, working with young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. That's something that really needs to be done properly. And also the following day, self-care. Then we've got building resilience. And if we go below that, we've got the skills, the knowledge, what attitudes we're trying to bring about, how we're doing it. Chat's having breakout rooms. And sorry, one more thing. I should also mention this was designed where it could be delivered online as well, if need be. So it was done in a way to consider any potential risks with COVID-19 if it was indeed to come to the NT. So we planned for that. So it could virtually be done either face-to-face or online, which is awesome. We're almost there. We did a masterclass with the expert Karen Sheldon facilitators, and it was great to see the buy-in from them. As I mentioned, throughout this whole program, we've really fostered a collective approach. I know you'd all agree. I think that's really important to make sure but everybody's on the same page and everybody feels like their opinion is valued and being considered. And as you can see on this slide, you know, we've got some great feedback, which is good to see from the trainers who are delivering it on the ground, which is very important. Community engagement, that's been ongoing throughout this project. Job active providers, CD providers, high schools, youth network meetings, just generally catching up with providers who work with young people as a potential referral point. So we've been doing a lot of work around this space as well. The employer engagement went awesome. You know, we've got approximately 30 service providers who are willing to take young people on for placement, both in Darwin and Alice Springs. We had a meeting just on the Monday that passed, and, you know, it was amazing. You know, just to see the support that we had for our young people was refreshing. And as I keep alluding to, the collective and collaboration that's required to provide meaningful pathways for our young Indigenous job seekers is really important, particularly acknowledging the gap between non-Indigenous and Indigenous employment seekers. So we really need to work together on that. Here's a quick photo of how some of our surveys look. Now, this is to break down barriers around any literacy challenges. You know, Darwin can be very different. Tennant Creek, NPYWC mentioned that sometimes the literacy levels are, gee, I actually have a mental blank here, but considerably lower than Darwin. So we've used emoji as a form of trying to sort of guide the question, and facilitators have been encouraged to walk through with some of the questions with participants without obviously giving them the answer, because that would defeat the purpose of the survey. Alrighty, towards the end, we're just finishing up here. So here are a couple of photos of CarePlays VR and where we've come to today. As I mentioned, we're coming to the end of week 3. We've had some amazing guest speakers. The picture over here is Richard Fijo, who's an elder from Larrakia, and he delivered a talk to our young people. And I'm telling you now, having been on the ground volunteering a lot with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, you know, they want to work in the sector. They really want an opportunity, and we need to provide meaningful pathways for them. There's a lot of passion. You know, half the battle is actually letting our participants know that they often already have the skills and knowledge that are really valuable for the sector. So fostering a strength-based approach is one that I definitely agree with. And it's about building confidence and, you know, actually providing real tangible outcomes for our participants. So thank you all for listening. Cheers.
Dan, thank you very much. Yeah, I'd have to say that it is a pleasure to be working with Dan on, you know, in terms of the Care Plays VR. It's and I think I want to highlight a couple of things. That 30 employers have signed up to provide opportunities for young people, and yet we hear so often that it's hard to get employers, but 30. And I know that through this week, we've had great contributions from employers all through this week, talking about how important it is to have young people coming into their workplaces and this grappling with this issue of work experience and work transition. So we've got a minute or so for questions for Dan. And or Rochelle making her comment that I cut her off on before. Sorry, Rochelle. But has anyone got any questions for Dan? We've got Carly saying it's a fantastic initiative, Dan, and very impressive implementation. And Tracy's cogs are spinning. So, which is, but as Jen said, Tracy and Carly also do excellent work as well. Okay.
I'll ask one. I know we've only got 1 minute. I'm always going to ask about money because I'm just really interested in, and the Committee for Geelong does have significant engagement with the commercial sector and obviously large employers as well. So as I asked Newcastle, it's about often for an employer's perspective, having that person that can ease the way, you know, just to make it not too overly bureaucratic and or make it really easy for them to engage. How have you managed to either get that funded, or what supports do you have to have, you know, have had those 30 come on board? What were the things you did to make it easy for them?
Well, I think the 2-week placement, I mean, it's unpaid, so it's a voluntary opportunity for the young person. But I really tried to sell our young people and actually tell our employers that, you know, this is also a good opportunity for you to have a young person do 2-week placement with you and identify if it's a great fit. You know, they're doing a 4-week course that's building their confidence, and they're finally having this light bulb moment. You know what? I can speak multiple languages, and that's extremely valuable in the NT. You know, I should be actually acknowledging that. So, you know, I go to employers. It's a balance of both. You know, I'm respectful of employers. You know, sometimes capacity can be challenged. But I'm also saying our young people, they're great talent, and it provides your organisation to get some awesome talent and build a young workforce, particularly in, I say, aged care and disability. You know, we need more young people in that sector. So for employers, you know, we're doing a lot of the hard work by linking in great talent into your organisation, where they could end up staying for a very long time, particularly in remote communities. As I said, you know, sometimes people can leave communities. That's just a fact, because, you know, their home mightn't be in Maningrida, they might be down in Melbourne and so on. But people that are employed in those regions may likely stay because their family live there. So they've got that connection. So that's how I'm sort of pitching it.
And thanks, Bernadette. I think we'll unpack those multiple presentation slides after this event.
We certainly will. Thank you, Dan. I'm just going to share my screen as well now and look at the takeouts that we've had from the week. But as I think about Leone's presentation, Simon and Rochelle's and Dan's presentations, Leone talked about lifelong learning, and we've been talking about lifelong learning all week. Simon, I think you referred to year 11s dropping out at a rate never seen before. And I know Phil Honeywell really alluded to, you know, that it hasn't all been cream and jam for young people. And certainly Charlie did too, for young people through COVID. But also the piece about the economic development framework actually being geared towards people. All week, we've been talking people and not technology in the future of work, which is fabulous. And of course, Dan has talked about relationship building, cab off the rank, relationship building for the young people, collaboration and collective action. So thank you, because as we look at what we've been talking about this week, we've been, I'll just get down here. We, of course, have been looking at what is the future of work for the G21 region and what's our preferred future. So throughout the week, we've engaged in a number of conversations. Oops, I don't get my... and we've been privileged to listen to a number of, the inspiring guest speakers as well. And all of us, through every conversation, we've been focused on the future of work and the sort of community we want to live in and work in. And we've considered what our preferred future looks like. So we've talked about a G21 region where our communities are inclusive and equitable, prosperous and resilient, innovative and imaginative, healthy, active and welcoming. And I think our three guest speakers this morning all talked about every one of these things, which is terrific. But including that, in terms of the link to this morning's discussion, is that Leone drew on the Sustainable Development Goals of quality education, decent work and economic growth, and sustainable cities and communities. And we've certainly had some of these conversations over the last 12 months, but also through this week around what's the link to the Sustainable Development Goals for our region. We talked, we're of course looking within the context of Industry 4 and Education 4, and how Education 4 is not just going to equip us for Industry 4, but equip us for beyond, I hate to say beyond Industry 4. We're looking at, we've looked at themes around traditional ways of working that are changing, and this may change where people choose to live, which can open enormous opportunities for the G21 region, a beautiful region of the world to live in. And Leone talked about this in terms of the learning, but personalised, individualised and applied, learning that's just in time, learning that's tailored to acquire knowledge, skills and wisdom. And certainly Anna Negro and Catherine Lockhart and Phil Honeywell all challenged our current, the previous approach, traditional ways of learning, and we're really setting the sort of the bar to how can we move to Education 4 and this model of personalised, individualised and applied. Again, creating and sustaining relationships, emotional intelligence, that creativity piece underpinning, not just the digital world underpinning, but our ability to be creative underpinning our work. And we've talked about being underpinned by digital, but underpinned by resilience, values and ethics. So we've also got we've got layers upon layers now that we're saying are critically important to underpinning our work. We've got the thorny problem of work and work-like experiences for young people that Dan has just so brilliantly told us about, the approach in the Northern Territory. We've got the predominance, overwhelming predominance in the G21 region of small to medium-sized enterprises, and the need for all of us as a community to support our SMEs to continually skill their workforce and to enable them to partner and network so that they can be strong players in constantly evolving global supply chains. And there was lots of talk about sovereign capability and the changing nature of economics and the challenges that a potentially jobless recovery might present us in terms of COVID. Leone, as I said, talked about the learning community piece, and we've touched on that through the week as well. Collaboration has been a major topic, and also the focus on resolving poverty, the lack of opportunities and the lack of access. And Dan talked again about, we've lived in a country that's been well off over the last few years, but we still have these issues that are sitting there to solve, and harnessing digital capability. We've got it. We've started to harness it with COVID. That's been one of the benefits of COVID. Now, how do we embed that and harness it systematically so that we don't have a sort of patchy approach to work, education and community going forward? So if we look at our preferred future, we talked about a prosperous economy where we don't have people living in poverty and all our people can realise the benefits of healthy living. We talked about our young people being able to successfully complete secondary school and transition into education and employment with skills, confidence and resilience to learn and innovate across life. All our young people, not just some of our young people, all our young people. We talked about incorporating environmental sustainability into in all aspects of our lives, investing in not just our children, but our children's children. We've talked about embracing and really learning from and celebrating our Indigenous heritage and cultural diversity. It's not just celebrating, but embracing and learning from. And we've got, I think, if we look to, just go back, if we look to a preferred future and think, are we prepared to commit to that preferred future? Then it's worth looking at, if we're not prepared to commit to that preferred future, well, what potentially is the alternative? Well, if we don't want our preferred future, we can have an inequitable community where some of us prosper and thrive, but we're quite happy to still let others live in poverty. And pre-COVID, 10% of the G21 community is living in poverty. Now, I don't have the up-to-date figures from COVID, but I suspect in the next few months it's going to be more than 10%. We would have a closed community that's not welcoming. We're going to have winners and losers in our alternative, and we're not going to have winners and winners. And we're not all going to get the benefits of a healthy lifestyle. So I think if we think about our preferred future compared to what our alternatives can look like, I'm hoping everyone is going to prefer our preferred future. We're looking at a region in our alternative that doesn't innovate and isn't environmentally sustainable and is left behind. So I love Donkey from Shrek. So are we there yet? And indeed, when I got to 10 minutes out of Biak on the way to Queensland, my youngest at the time actually said, are we there yet? So if we look and think in terms of are we there yet? Well, look, we're well on the way, I think, from the last week that we've had of conversations. We've got enormous goodwill. We've got existing strong networks. We've got clear alignment between the whole of the G21 community on in articulating the challenges and also identifying the opportunities. And we've got a real commitment from everyone to collaborate. But I think we also have a long and windy way to go. So the questions, I think, for us as we think anew and act anew are, what do I do and what do we collectively need to do to realise our preferred future? What can we leave behind? And what have we learnt in the last little while in terms of things that we can take forward? So the Committee for Geelong, I'll just come back. The Committee for Geelong has looked at, through the week, the conversations and the issues that have come up and has formulated some draft actions for us to take forward and consider. So action 1, promoting the work that's done by members and stakeholders. And I'm going to just go through these quickly. I won't read them out to you because I can see our time is disappearing. I'll just quickly go through. We're talking about advocating. So we're promoting, we're advocating, we're facilitating, we're working with each other, we're continuing to contribute to the next generation of business and community leaders, and we're going to report back and measure and review. So that's our 6 actions that we've been able to pull out of this week to date. There's a volume to be typed up and looked at and fed into our next steps, but which we will do to refine the action plan, and we'll convene a core group of stakeholders next year to look at how we can support the promulgation of our preferred future going forward. So thank you very much, everyone. Just very quickly, Jen, I'd like to thank Our guest speakers through the week, Professor Russell Tytler, Peter White, Dr. Sue Olney, Dan Nahum, Dr. Leone Walker this morning, Simon Massey, Rochelle Hedstrom, and Daniel Noon, and our conversation facilitators, Professor Ian Martin, Clive Pugh, Carly Brennan, Anna Negro, Catherine Lockhart, Phil Honeywell, Charlie Scudamore, and Elaine Carbines. And as I hand back over to you, I'd also like to say a big thank you to Holly Earle, Stephanie Price, and Kaz Webster, Jen, who've just been, they've made it happen. So thank you very much, Jen.
Thanks, and I'll be very short, sharp and say it has been a mammoth effort, so thank you so much, Bernadette. But I've asked Clive Pugh, the chair of the Committee for Geelong, just to make some closing remarks. But I will say to everyone here today, we will be in touch and we will keep discussing what we actually plan to do. And, you know, we're really committed to this as an organisation, as an action area. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Jen, and Bernadette, thank you for your enormous work this week. You and your team and the Committee for Geelong team always do a sterling job putting on events like this, and to sustain a whole week's worth of events is fantastic. To derive learning from those events is even more important, and that's the most vital part of the work that we do. I always feel a bit inadequate at this point because, you know, I beaver away at running my business and then step back and listen to the reflections on people who are working in the area of research and study, and realise that sometimes there seems an enormous disconnect between my world and their world, and the work that we need to do to try and bring those together is significant. SMEs are a really important part of our economy now. We don't have large employers in the G21 region. 90% or more of the jobs are in businesses that employ less than 20 people. And so when we talk about the capacity of the community to engage in some of these programs, we have to consider that that is more difficult for SMEs who are busy running their businesses and not so able to automatically participate in programs that we want to generate support for employment or changing future of work. And I think that's something we need to give consideration to as to how we overcome that. I've worked for a number of years with a HR provider who is, I'm going to say old school because he doesn't come from an academic background, but he has written in the academic space. And I'm going to quote from him now. His name is Robert Rees. He comes out of Ballarat. And in his latest book, he says, and he's quoting from someone else here, but he says, one of the most important things in life for us to do is to pause, step back, see through the information smog, and to discern what is important and gain deeper awareness and synthesis of information. And that as leaders, too often we step forward with action to deal with complexity without first stepping back for the clarity that we need. And I think that that's, to me, a really good summation of the week. It's time to spend to seek clarity, to gather the information and reflect, and that our actions will follow, but they require deeper contemplation first. So look, just with those comments, a thank you to everyone who's been on board, to Jen and Bernadette in particular. Thank you for the work that you've done. And we look forward to the next chapter in the future of work and see where that takes us. So thank you very much.